I was a child when this happened, somewhere between the ages of 5 and 10 years old. I don't remember everything clearly, and a lot of what I know now comes from my mom telling me the details years later. But the parts that I do remember, they come to me in flashes. I remember the smell of my sister's room, the sounds of her crying, and the heavy weight of the mattress pressed up against the wall above our heads. My mom had this longtime friend named Donna. She and Donna basically grew up with each other, and Donna's daughter was about my age. They'd both come over to our house pretty often. We'd have sleepovers, eat snacks on the living room floor, and stay up way too late playing games. Donna's daughter was practically a cousin to me. Donna was practically a sister to my mom. There were two people I remember growing up with. Donna had this boyfriend named Fred. I didn't know much about him at the time, only that he was the man that Donna sometimes argued with on the phone. My mom would roll her eyes whenever his name would come up. I didn't know the gravity of it then, but it was clear that Donna's relationship with Fred was rocky at best, dangerous at worst. On the night where everything happened, Donna and her daughter were at our house. I can't recall whether Donna had already been staying with us or if she showed up that night after a fight with Fred. But I do know that there was tension in the air. Even as a kid, you can tell when adults are nervous and doing things differently than normal. Well, at some point that evening, Donna came rushing into my room where my sister and I were playing. Her face was pale. Her eyes were huge. She was frantic, but she was quiet, as if she was listening for something. Without any explanation at all, she told us that we needed to get into my sister's room now. She hurried us all inside, ushering me, my sister, and her daughter through the door. She shut the door, locked it. My sister's room was the smallest in the house. It was also the only bedroom in the back of the house. Against one wall was my sister's full-sized bed. In one motion, Donna flipped it up on its side, pressing the mattress and box spring against the wall like a makeshift fort. She told us to lie down on the floor between the wall and the bed frame, and all of us kids did as we were told. She then pushed the dresser against the door for good measure, effectively barricading us inside. I remember closing my eyes and covering my ears. It was dark in the room, and I was still scared of the dark back then. The room even felt darker than usual with the mattress blocking any light coming from the hallway. My sister was crying softly beside me. Donna's daughter squeezed my hand. I kept my eyes shut tight. I knew that this wasn't a game that we were playing, but I hoped that whatever this was, it would just go away. That's the last thing I remember from that night. The rest that I'm about to tell you, my mom told me years later. Apparently, Fred had shown up at our house unexpectedly, and he was looking for Donna. My mom, not wanting a scene, went outside to try to defuse the situation. She told Fred that Donna wasn't there, that she hadn't heard from her, and that he had no right to be at our house. She did her best to keep her voice calm and steady, but Fred, he didn't buy any of it. As my mom tried to shoo him away, Fred went back to his car, and he came back out holding some kind of shotgun. My mom, who was standing in front of our house at that moment, saw the gun and went to run back inside. She had made it up our stairs, in through the door, and closed it just before Fred fired. That blast shot through the door and peppered her back with pellets, and tore into the front of our house as well. Fred only fired one time, and to this day, I don't know what stopped him from doing more. The blast left my mom wounded and bleeding. It knocked her to the floor, unable to do anything other than focus on her own breathing. It was around that time that the police arrived. My mom had already called the police when she saw Fred pull up. The station was only a block or two away from our house, if I remember correctly. I know that she was hoping that officers would arrive before things escalated. It didn't work out that way, but my mom did everything she could to keep that man out of our house. Shortly after the police arrived, so did the paramedics. They could hear my mom yelling for help from the entryway of our home, and they got her into the ambulance and on the way to the hospital as quickly as they could. They didn't know exactly how hurt she was, but they weren't going to take any more time than necessary to get her to doctors. My mother's boyfriend at the time worked nights, and when he got word of what was happening, he rushed home immediately. My dad, who shared custody of us with my mom, also rushed over. But all he got from the frantic phone call my mom sent him was, "Boyfriend shooting near kids." He thought it was my mom's boyfriend who'd opened fire. When he arrived, I'm sure with adrenaline pumping, he punched the boyfriend square in the face before anyone could explain. He basically knocked the guy out cold. Later, when my dad realized that he'd attacked the wrong man, he apologized. There had never been any bad blood between them before, and there wasn't after. Especially once he understood that the boyfriend had left work to check on us as soon as he heard what was going on. When the cops had initially arrived, they swarmed our street. Fred was subdued without a fight shortly after. My mom told me that all of this happened so fast, though I have no sense of how much time passed between her being shot, the police getting there, and my dad cold-cocking her boyfriend. In the months that followed, my mom recovered physically, but the damage that she took, that lasted. The pellets from Fred's shotgun stayed in her back and her neck for the rest of her life, causing chronic pain that doctors couldn't treat, and for some reason wouldn't risk removing. My mom finally filled in all the gaps about that night for me, about a year before she passed away. The way she told this story reframed everything that I remembered from that night. As a kid, I thought we were just hiding from some angry man. I didn't realize that my mom had been shot trying to protect us and her best friend. I didn't know how close that things had come to being far worse. Looking back, it's pretty surreal. I can see little me crouched on the carpet, my eyes squeezed shut, Donna's daughter's hand in mine. Donna even pushing furniture against the door to keep us safe. On the other side of that wall, my mom was bleeding, fighting to keep Fred from reaching us. All these years later, that night feels like a story that someone else told me, except I was there. The details that I do remember, I just can't shake. My sister's sobs, the musty smell of that mattress against the wall, the sounds of drawers scraping against the floor as Donna barricaded the door. My mom died with those pellets still in her body. Several medals of honor from the night where she stood between us and a man with a gun. Fred ultimately went to prison for the attempted murder of my mom. He was sentenced to 15 years for what he did. From what I was told, he was going to be released after serving 10 of those 15 years, due to overcrowding of the prison he was in and the general way the legal system works here in the States. Fred never stepped foot outside of prison, though. Shortly before he was set to be freed, Fred was involved in some kind of fight. He was stabbed 16 times before passing away behind bars. I shed no tears for this man, as he received the fate that he was trying to impart on my mother. Kind of a poetic ending in my book. So, I want to preface before beginning my story that these events took place several decades ago, so I apologize if my memory doesn't serve me as well as it used to. A close friend has heard this story several times over the years, and he always recommends me telling this story on Reddit, so I'm going to give it a shot. Now, I'm no Hemingway, but I'll try to tell this story as best as I can. I grew up in a smaller town in central Washington, one of those small farming towns that you pass by to somewhere more interesting. I was born in the great year of 1970, early December. My family raised cattle and worked construction all of their lives. Humble living, as my grandpa always said. My young childhood was closely spent working with my father on the farm, put to work the second I could keep my feet under me. I had 2 older brothers who truly could only be described as rough around the edges. The entire town knew my brothers. They were loud, brash, and didn't care whose toes they'd stepped on. As for me, I was a bit more of the mama's boy of the family. Our community was pretty connected. Just a few farmers and their families. We'd meet in the Grange Hall for something we called family lunch every Sunday after church. If there was a problem or if someone had a problem, we all knew it before sundown. No story could escape this town's grasp. The wives would meet up and gossip about anything new under the guise of a book club. Because of this, us kids could never get away from anything. Even back then, before a world filled with cell phones, it was almost as if we always had cameras on us. That being said, I remember when the whispers around town started. I believe it started around when I was 15. This mysterious man was the talk of the town. It was around the summer of 1984, and the only reason I really remember that is because it was around the time Bruce Springsteen released his Born in the USA album. This man would wear a white shirt, a red hat with blue jeans, and dark brown work boots. Due to this, everyone around here started to call him Bruce. At first, all of us neighborhood kids thought it was another boogeyman tale. Families would tell their kids, "Keep your window closed, or Bruce will get you." None of us really took the story seriously, as most kids do. During that time, the only thing we cared about was camping outside in the forest and pretending to be G.I. Joe members in the midst of a heated conflict. Some kids would say that they saw Bruce in the tree line while we were out there, but no one would take them seriously, and they'd get called a bitch or something. Even with this, we'd still kind of get that chill down our spines at night. That same kind of chill that you'd get when someone was spying on you. In hindsight, even though we'd tease those kids for saying they saw Bruce, we still had the fear of him spotting us. I remember thinking I was invulnerable from having Bruce see me due to my window being on the second story of our house, though I still kept my blinds closed just in case. When summer ended and the dreaded school year came back around, the noise of Bruce around the town diminished. I even forgot about him, and it seemed as if the town's resident boogeyman had left just as fast as he came, though there were still those whispers around family lunch. One Sunday afternoon, I remember my father speaking to one of our neighbors. "Davy's son says he saw the man looking through his window the other night." "Ah, that's a load of horse, and you know it. That whole Bruce thing was a story to make the kids behave," my dad said. "Maybe, but even Davy seemed shaken up from it," the neighbor said back. My neighbor was right, too. I was close with Johnny, the kid they were talking about, and he and his entire family swore up and down about it. Johnny told me that he woke up early one morning to that chill down his spine. Dude, it was freaky. He was just standing there, and his hat kind of covered his face, so it was hard to see what he looked like. He said that later he screamed for his dad, and this dude still just stood there. No reaction or anything, just kept looking directly at Johnny. When his dad finally stumbled into his room, his dad noticed Bruce. He ran outside with his shotgun in hand. Johnny said that the man had no reaction to his father either. He just kept standing there, staring intently. By the time their front door opened and the first shot rang out, Bruce was gone, almost as a ghost disappearing into fog. Johnny's dad swore that 1 second the man was there, then when he raised his shotgun and fired, he was gone. The dad called the sheriff's office over, but there was no trace of Bruce. Deputy just said that if he comes back, to call them out first. Johnny told the story maybe 100 times that year, yet just like before, everyone would tease him and deny his story. My mom was pretty close to their family, so she tried to keep us boys on a short leash. Funny enough, she'd always say before we'd go anywhere, "Be careful, and don't let that PDF file get you." My brothers would always mockingly say, "We'll kill him before he could even touch us, Ma." I don't know if the story of Bruce ever really bothered my brothers as much as it bothered me, though even after Johnny's story, I still had a slight bit of skepticism in me. I mean, I never got to see him. Until later. The first time I ever had a Bruce run-in was later that year during a pretty harsh winter. My father was remodeling our sunroom. Due to that, our front door was a plastic tarp stapled on the doorframe. And might I add, it was the absolute worst time to not have a door. Snow would get into the front entrance from the storm the night prior, and the entire house would feel like it was negative 100 degrees. Anyway, I digress. I remember it was the weekend, and my birthday was the Friday before. My brother scraped up some money to rent me the first Indiana Jones movie. Honestly, it was as much of a gift for me as it was for them. My father was out getting supplies for the sunroom, and my mother was grocery shopping. My brothers and I were sitting on the couch watching the movie intently. Watching that movie, you could almost see it in my eyes. The dream to be a cool archaeologist, just like Harrison Ford, whip and hat included. Now, I don't know if it was because we were watching so closely, but we never noticed when our father's pickup pulled up. My father came up and flicked my oldest brother's ears and shouted, How many times do I have to tell you dipshits to leave your boots outside before coming onto the carpet? We all stared at each other, confused. My father had his arm outstretched and was pointing at a pair of snow prints that had to have been no closer than 7 feet from the back of our couch. The snow hadn't yet melted and still looked fresh. "Dad, we've been inside for the last..." My dad interrupted my brother. "Oh, don't give me that bullshit. Go clean that up and go help your mother with the groceries." I can still remember the look on my brother's faces as they stared at each other, with maybe bewilderment, or maybe it was fear. I remember lying in bed that night, trying to make up some rational explanation on whose footprints those could be. Anyone other than Bruce's. Eventually, I was able to knock out with some made-up story that sounds only logical to someone up that late in the night. My brothers later both blamed me for the prints, and I became a chore boy for my father because of it. Yet, those prints still stood out to me, mostly because of how close they were. If there even was someone behind us, surely we would have heard the rustling of the plastic tarp, right? Now, obviously, I never told this story to anyone due to the fear of social suicide. I couldn't take those kinds of skeletons following me into high school. Nothing special happened for the rest of the winter for my family. My father finally got a door onto the porch just in time for it to finally warm up. In those warm, sweaty nights, I prayed for the house to return to its freezing temperatures. For most kids my age at that time, there was a lot of going swimming, partying, and late nights with girlfriends. For me and my brothers, we just had more time to help Dad. Long, grueling hours directly in the sun while working on houses for people whose cars were worth more money than my entire family's net worth. After long, drawn-out hours of being barked at by our father, our treat was to come home and either buck freshly harvested hay into our barn or tend to the animals. Yet, after all of this, we always had a hearty meal cooked straight from my mother's hands ready for us at the end of the day. We'd eat till we couldn't pick up a fork, just to head to bed and do it all over again the next day. On the rare occasions where we had our days of freedom, my brothers and I would scatter across the town to our respective friend groups, occasionally meeting up at house parties or a bonfire. One of those nights we had off from working with our dad, my brothers and I all piled into our older brother's truck and drove off to one of those great bonfire nights. It seemed as if the entire town would show up to these events. Family and friends alike would all show up in droves. The adults with the young ones would come out and eat and enjoy the social aspect. Later in the day, when the sun would try to set, the only ones left would be the teens trying to sneak a beer and the fun uncles supplying them. When we showed up, it was a typical crowd. The ones around my brother and their age, with some parents still straggling around. When we stepped out of the truck, the remaining parents said what basically became our tagline anywhere we went. "Oh damn, here comes trouble." All the parents and the kids our age would laugh as we'd go and sit on the assortment of furniture and bench seats that surrounded the fire. We would all sit and chat with those who we were familiar with, all while those with more boldness than brains would try to sneak a beer from the coolers, myself included. As the night would roll on, the host parents would give the same speech every parent would give to all of us kids at these events. "Now, I can't stop you from drinking, but don't be stupid and go off and drive as well. Either sleep it off or call your parents. The phone's inside next to the fridge, and don't you dare wake me up unless one of you is dying." They'd smile and wave goodnight as they'd head off inside. We'd all say our thanks and commence to having the real party. The older ones would try to go and smoothly talk one of the few women that showed up, only to get shut down, walk to the cooler, and plop down on one of the random chairs. I remember that night I was sitting down on some broken down bench seat with one of the springs jabbing into my side. Nonetheless, I would hold my beer and try to be as cool as I possibly could. People were conversing when my eyes were drawn to something near the tree line at the back of the property, something that stood out because it was artificially white. Through swaying eyes, I was able to focus on a figure standing there. Blue jeans, white shirt, red hat. He had his hands to his side, and it was too far away to make out a face. It took a bit before the thought finally pushed through my drunken mind. "No way," I remember mumbling to myself. My friend who was sitting next to me, who mind you, was deep into telling me how in love he was with this girl, said annoyingly, "Dude, are you even listening to me right now?" I didn't answer him, but just kept staring back at the man, trying to believe this had to be some trick from the lighting and the shadows. My friend finally turned his head to look at what I was gawking at. "Who's that?" he asked. I have no idea, but it kind of looks like that guy everyone was describing last summer. Dude, that was just some dumb rumor Johnny's parents came up with. No, I know, but isn't it kind of weird some adult-looking dude is just standing all the way out there? Plus, isn't it miles and miles of forest land back there? Where could he have even come from? I remember looking back at my friend confused. He stared right back at me, and you could almost see a glimmer of fear pass across his eyes. Our eyes narrowed, and instantly we both darted our heads back to the tree line, only to see nothing. Just the outline of trees and darkness. Suddenly that fire didn't feel so warm, and the cool summer air just felt plain cold. Our eyes searched across the trees, trying to get a glimpse of what we just saw, but there honestly wasn't anything but trees and more trees. We turned back to each other, and that fear became something more, closer to confusion. We both knew that it had only been a second or so that our eyes were off of him, yet there was no trace of him. We looked around the fire to see if anyone had seen what we had just seen, yet everyone seemed too deep into conversation to notice or even care. Then, to almost cut the tension that lingered in the air, my oldest brother grasped both of my shoulders. Instantly, I leapt up and stiffened up like a board. My brother mockingly said something along the lines of, "What? Still scared of the dark?" I laughed it off and said something vulgar back to him. He told me that our other brother was still trying to get lucky, so he'd be spending the night there. My oldest brother was going to go home, and he asked if I wanted to go home as well. My oldest brother wasn't much of a drinker, so I knew at the very least, this would be a good chance to get home safely instead of sleeping in some field. He and I both got into his pickup, and we waved goodbye to the remaining few. We drove off back down the road, all while music played from the late-night radio. By the time we had gotten home, that lingering eeriness that I felt had all but left me. I thanked my bro for the ride and went to lie down on the couch, not having the energy to crawl upstairs and into my bed. As the night's events faded into memories, the obvious remained painted on the inside of my eyelids. That man standing out in the tree line, watching us like he was one of the trees. That same chill I felt crawled its way up my spine as my mind slipped into unconsciousness. It's getting pretty late while writing this. I have work in the morning, and it's hard to try and condense and remember stories from so much time ago. I've been trying to spice up my words and storytelling to the best of my ability without exaggerating any of the actual story. I have much more to tell about Bruce and a lot more interesting stories, but for now, I think it's time to get some rest. Most folks brush off boogeyman stories as harmless folklore, a way to keep kids well behaved and from wandering too far off after dark. But when the tales stop being stories and become something that you've seen for yourself, they're no longer innocent. People might doubt what I've said both here and back in my hometown, but that doesn't erase what we lived through back in 1984. Long-time lurker, first-time poster. After reading similar stories, I feel it's time that I came forward with my own. Out of respect for everyone's privacy, names in this story will be changed. The important people to know are me and my cousin, who we'll call Drew. Some of the prominent neighborhood kids we'll call Josh, Kylie, Evan, and Gabe. To set the story, this was around the time my mom and dad divorced. It wasn't a clean one, and there was a lot going on around this time. My mom ended up moving out of our childhood home into a small house about 20 miles away, and my dad kept the house in our neighborhood. I bring this up to explain that although my two brothers decided to stay with my dad, me and my cousin, who lived with most of us his life, decided to move in with my mom. The issue was that my mom's new place wasn't within the school district, which meant no buses served her house. So the setup was that she'd bring us to school before work, and after school we would catch the bus to my dad's house and stay there for a couple of hours until she got off work. Now that all of that is explained, let's get into what you're really here for. There were quite a few kids in our neighborhood, and I guess you could say we all got along. We hung out quite a bit. We would all ride the bus together, hang out after school, and hell, even try to build forts in the moss. The moss was a spot in the woods you could access through a small opening at the end of our cul-de-sac. An important detail for later. It was an everyday thing for us, until one day a new family had moved into the neighborhood, and with them was their son, Gabe. He had brown hair, and he was skinny. We first met Gabe on the school bus, and us being curious about the new kid in the neighborhood, we were all eager to talk to him. You'd probably think we got some off vibe from him, or maybe something about him was creepy. But honestly, he just seemed like a regular kid. He seemed to fit in with the other kids in the neighborhood. It became normal to see me, Josh, Kylie, Drew, Evan, and Gabe all hanging out together. Rather, all of us, or a combination of the few. After getting to know him, we learned that Gabe had actually attended our school in the past, but he was expelled after he threw stuff at a teacher. It was only this school year that they let him back in. Back then, we brushed it off as something edgy that he did, but knowing the events now, that should have been our first red flag. You see, Gabe, Drew, and I became close. I'd argue closer than the other kids in our group. I would have considered him a close friend instead of just another neighborhood kid to hang out with, which is why we didn't immediately drop him after the following events. I wasn't there for this, but I heard about it after the fact. Drew and I got on the bus one day, and immediately I noticed Gabe wasn't there. We sat next to each other every day on the bus. I just assumed that he was absent, and Drew decided to sit by me. Kylie and Evan, who sat near us, started talking about something that happened, and we joined into their conversation. Apparently, not long after Drew and I left to go to my mom's, Gabe had invited Kylie, Evan, and Josh to his house. Now, I don't remember what set this in motion or what really happened, but the hangout ended with Gabe chasing Josh home. Not in a playful game of tag sort of manner, but with a knife in his hands. Josh lived on the other side of the neighborhood, and once he got home, his mother came out to see what was going on as she heard him yelling for her from the front yard. When she stepped out, Gabe chased both of them inside. The scariest part of this, they heard from Josh that he was laughing, and he had a smile on his face as he did it. Like he enjoyed terrorizing them. The cops were called, and honestly, I don't know what came out of that, other than Gabe was gone from school for a few days after. When he came back, he acted like it never happened. The kids in our neighborhood started growing apart from Gabe after that. I mean, who would blame them for it? I guess I felt a little bad for Gabe. My stupid kid brain must have decided that it was a bad prank that went too far, or something like that. I truly believe Gabe had changed after it, like something had clicked in his brain. Well, not long after, we were on the bus, and I was talking to him as we sat in the same seats we always did, when randomly, he pulled a pencil out of his bag and tried to stab me with it. He not only tried, but he got me in the neck. Luckily, it only just broke the skin, but it shocked the hell out of me. He laughed like he was joking, and I decided to move seats. When I got off the bus, I felt the need to explain what happened to the bus driver. I never should have done that. I believe to this day that one choice caused what happened next. Gabe was kicked off the bus for a couple of days. When he returned, they made him sit at the front of it. He knew it was me who snitched on him. When I'd walk past him to get off the bus, he would glare at me, and it felt like pure evil. He called me names, a snitch, and I was a bit scared of him now. Fast forward about a week, and all the kids in our neighborhood just decided that they wouldn't hang out with Gabe anymore. I wish that I could say the same. Even after everything that I just spilled to you, I was naive and dumb. Eventually, he messaged me apologizing and asked me if Drew and I wanted to hang out. I don't know why, but we all agreed. I think I remembered him saying that he and some other kids were going to hang out in the moss and build some forts. And I think that's why we agreed, because there would be other kids there. So we set off to meet him at his house, which was just down the street from ours. We knocked on his door and he answered it, holding a knife. Okay, screw the red flag. I was ignoring a whole red alarm at this point. It was a kitchen knife with some sort of orange handle. With a smile on his face, he held up his arm and just started cutting himself. I know now that we should have just left right then and there. Why didn't we just leave? After a couple of cuts, he laughed, like this was some sort of joke. It wasn't until now that I realized that this kid was psychotic, like something was really wrong with him. He had a couple of tools with him and told us to follow him to the moss. And once again, for some dumb reason, we just did. I was holding out hope that he'd be normal when all the other kids would be there. We got to the small opening leading to the moss and walked in. To get to the small pond in the moss, you had to go down a hill and through the brush. Then you'd be there. I bet you could feel my surprise when I realized there was nobody else there. I looked at Gabe, who just chuckled. "They must be late. Let's just get started," he said. Both Drew and I were on edge, and I bet Gabe could feel it. "Hey man, why don't you go find some sticks and logs to build the fort," he told me. He pointed over towards the pond. I obeyed and made my way over to the area. About 10 or 15 seconds after I started walking, I got the feeling to turn around. And I'll never ever stop thanking God for doing just that. Gabe was there, creeping up to my cousin who was picking up a large rock. Gabe had a hoe-looking tool in his hand, raising it slowly. I shouted, "Hey," towards them. My cousin shot up, and Gabe quickly lowered that hoe and looked at me in confusion. I ran back over to them, telling them that my mom just messaged me and that it was time to go. Obviously, this was a lie. My phone only worked on Wi-Fi at the time, but Gabe didn't know that. I felt that Gabe knew that I saw him. So without hesitation, I grabbed my cousin, who didn't for a second question me, and we quickly started leaving the area. At that moment, Gabe started chasing us. We booked it through the woods for a solid 45 seconds before we hit that hill, quickly climbing up it. I looked back and saw Gabe with a face I could only describe as a psychopath's. He was still chasing us, but he was losing ground. I prayed that we wouldn't slip or fall, and thank God that we didn't. Because Gabe struggled a little bit, this gave us time to get out of the moss. We ran halfway up the street and turned around. Gabe wasn't there anymore. In fact, we never saw him come out of the moss. We went home, and the next day we told some of the other kids what had happened. The weirdest part is, though, we never saw Gabe again. Not on the bus or at school. Very shortly after his parents moved from that house, and my dad moved out of that neighborhood a year later, with my mom finding a newer house within our school district. This was years ago. I recently looked Gabe up to see whatever happened to him, but nothing came up. No Facebook, no Instagram, no other social media. It's like the kid just vanished. Like he never even existed in the first place, but I know that he did. I don't live anywhere near there anymore, and that's another thing that I thank God for. Gabe, I don't know where you are or what happened to you, but let's agree to never fucking meet again.